The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the village as the day began to wind down. Golden Heart, now more familiar with the village's layout, had been quietly exploring the streets, his thoughts wandering back to Amy. He had hoped their last few conversations would have brought them closer, but Amy still kept him at arm's length. He understood in his heart that trust wouldn't come easily, but that didn't make it any less frustrating. He wanted to know her, to understand the weight she carried behind those guarded eyes. Yet every time they seemed to make progress, she retreated, leaving him wondering if he was doing the right thing by staying. As he rounded a corner, Golden Heart spotted a small crowd gathered near the market square. Curious, he approached, weaving through the villagers to get a better look. His eyes widened as he saw Amy standing at the centre, facing down a group of travellers who had come into the village. They were arguing loudly, and one of the strangers stepped forward, raising his voice in frustration.
I told you, we need more supplies than this.
The man shouted, his fists clenched at his sides.
We've traveled for days, and what you're offering isn't enough.
Amy stood her ground, her arms crossed, but her face calm and resolute.
I understand you've had a long journey, but we have to ensure there's enough for everyone in the village too. I'm sorry, but I can't give you more than what we can spare.
The man stepped closer, his expression hardening.
You don't understand. We're desperate.
Before he could take another step, Amy raised her hand, her voice sharp and unwavering.
I understand perfectly, but desperation doesn't give you the right to take what others need to survive. We're willing to help, but you have to respect the limits we've set.
Golden Heart watched from the sidelines, his chest tightening with admiration. There was a quiet strength in Amy's words, a firm resolve that commanded respect. She wasn't afraid to stand up for her village, even when faced with aggression. It was a side of her he hadn't seen before, one that hinted at the depth of her resilience and independence. The man grumbled something under his breath, but backed off, clearly realizing he wasn't going to get more than what Amy had offered. He and the other travelers eventually accepted the supplies with a begrudging nod, leaving the square in tense silence. As the crowd began to disperse, Golden Heart found himself standing there, still taking in the scene. Amy remained in the square, watching the travelers leave, with an unreadable expression on her face. It was only then that she noticed Golden Heart standing off to the side. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them. Golden Heart approached her slowly, careful not to disturb the calm that had settled over the square.
You handled that well,
He said, his voice soft but sincere.
Not everyone can stay that composed in a situation like that.
Amy shrugged, her usual guarded demeanor slipping back into place.
It's just part of the job. You learn to deal with people like that when you've been through enough.
Golden Heart frowned slightly, sensing the weight behind her words. There was more to her strength than just handling difficult people. There was a history of hardship, something deeper that she wasn't ready to share, but it was there, lurking just beneath the surface.
I can tell you've been through a lot.
Golden Heart said carefully, not wanting to push too hard, but hoping to open a door, even just a little.
It's admirable, the way you carry yourself. You protect this village, and you do it with such grace.
Amy looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the compliment.
I don't need anyone's admiration.
She said flatly.
I just do what needs to be done.
Golden Heart's heart ached at the distance in her tone. She was so strong, yet so determined to keep herself isolated from the care and support she deserved. He wanted to reach out, to offer her comfort, but he knew that any attempt to do so right now would only push her further away.
I know.
He said softly, his voice filled with empathy.
but that doesn't mean you don't deserve it.
Amy's eyes flicked to his, her expression hardening.
What do you want, Golden Heart? Why do you keep saying these things?
Golden Heart paused, taken aback by the sudden edge in her voice. He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully.
I just want to help, Amy. I see how much you do for everyone else, but it seems like no one's there for you.
Amy's face softened for the briefest moment, but she quickly looked away, her walls going back up.
I don't need anyone.
She said quietly, though there was a hint of something fragile in her voice.
I've been fine on my own.
Golden Heart wanted to tell her that no one should have to be fine on their own, that even the strongest people needed someone to lean on sometimes. But he could tell she wasn't ready to hear that yet.
Maybe.
He said gently.
But if you ever do, I'm here.
Amy didn't respond right away, her eyes still focused on the ground. The silence between them stretched on, heavy with unspoken emotions. Finally, she sighed, turning to face him with a tired, resigned look in her eyes.
I don't know what you're trying to do, Golden Heart.
She said, her voice quieter now, almost defeated.
But don't waste your time on me. I'm not someone you can fix.
Golden Heart's heart clenched at her words, the pain in her voice echoing through him. He took a step closer, his voice soft but filled with conviction.
I'm not here to fix you, Amy. I'm just here if you ever need someone.
Amy looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if trying to figure out what his angle was. But all she saw was sincerity. Slowly she nodded, though there was still a guardedness in her expression.
Thanks.
He said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper.
But I can handle things.
Golden Heart smiled, though there was a sadness in his eyes.
I know you can.
With that, Amy turned and walked away, leaving Golden Heart standing alone in the square. He watched her go, the weight of her words lingering in the air. She was strong, stronger than he had realized. But that strength came with a price, and it was a price she wasn't ready to let anyone share. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the village, Golden Heart sighed softly to himself. He knew this was going to take time, more time than he had anticipated, but he was willing to wait. Because beneath those walls, beneath the strength she showed the world, he could see the flicker of something more, and he wasn't going to give up on her. Not yet.